Hello, everyone. It's me, Vanessa Kisuule. I'm going to be your host for this event, and we are here to discuss the incredible debut poetry collection from Caleb Femi. This has been a long time coming. Caleb has been one of the most renowned and intriguing voices in our poetry community for a good long while. We've been sitting and we've been waiting patiently for when he was going to publish something, and he finally has, and it has been well worth the wait. This event has been facilitated by Festival of Ideas. We are really, really excited to be kicking off with Caleb in the building. Say hey.
Hey, hi everyone.
We have known each other for a while. You know, our paths have crossed intermittently on the poetry and open mic and slam scenes. And it's really nice to be seeing him, having just read this. And I feel, and I don't know whether this is a good or a bad thing for you, Caleb, but I feel fundamentally there's a shift in how I perceive you having read this. I don't think I can see you quite the same way again, because I promised myself I wouldn't gush, and I promise audience I won't go on and on, but it really is something that only comes along, I'd say, every decade, as far as the prowess and the craft of the writing. But even more than that, no, do you know what, Caleb? Just be quiet. Yeah, let me weave the words.
Sorry.
Okay. Not just on a craft level, but just as far as the way the topics and the themes that are addressed about living in inner city London, being a young Black boy, and how you're treated by the world. The way these communities are misunderstood and pathologized. These are topics that are so often spoken about by politicians or by people who look in with no real understanding or empathy for the nuances of that life. So to have something like this book that speaks with joy and intelligence and playfulness, and of course deep pain, but I feel like the pain is a requisite. We know that, you know, to be Black in these areas is to experience pain in so many ways, but actually to see all these other aspects of the experience displayed, to me, really sets it apart from many collections that I've read. So I'm really excited to discuss this book with you, Caleb. And audience, please do buy a copy of Caleb's book. You can press this turquoise button below our faces here if you haven't already bought your copy. And we'll just get right into it, I think. Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
All right, let's do this. So my first question is about this notion of who you're speaking to. And I know that that's something that you can never quite reconcile or control as a writer. And a big part of our job is to let that go. You know, we make the work and then we fling it into the world, and it will do what it will do. Yeah. But do you feel like you want to simultaneously speak to the community you're from and make work that resonates with them? And also have that critical and literary respect? Or do you think that one trumps the other as far as your priority? I'd be interested to know whether those two forces feel like they're opposed, or whether you feel like they can both happen simultaneously, and also if one is more important to you than the other.
I think the two actually complement one another.
Okay.
There's no sort of critical eye without context. Do you know what I mean? There's no way to have certain discussions without really placing yourself within the heart of whatever it is that you're speaking to or speaking about. I think predominantly one of the most important things when writing this was doing justice to my community, was this feeling like everyone in my community has to, or I hope that they sort of see themselves within this, or see parts of their experience in this, and therefore like give it a small cosign. I think in a general landscape of all the like discussions about inner city London or like youth being young and being youthful. I didn't even know how to use the word youth in context anymore. Or just like being young and being financially disadvantaged, being Black, being from the city was just something that is reduced, it's misrepresented, it's marginalized, it's sensationalized, it's turned into tropes and stereotypes and data. And for me, it was just about stretching that further, showing the complexities, showing the parts of it that never really gets to be celebrated, or at least be celebrated without being tokenized as well. Just like, listen, this is really just a snapshot of what happened or what has happened in my particular experience. So yes, I definitely felt this urge to make sure that like this was something that they felt like it was specifically coming from this community and therefore it was for the community. But also there's this general conversation that I wanted to have that implicated the rest of us, the rest of the people in the nation, the rest of all the other classes that get to look in and get to be comfortable, get to be voyeuristic in this experience. I wanted to implicate them and show them how they are also part of the sort of conveyor belt of this thing. You are never standing on the outside looking in. You are just, you're always inside. You just are a little bit further away from the center. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I really like that. I think earlier I phrased it as other people looking in, but you're totally right. There is always a role that you're playing within this dynamic, whether you're aware of it or not. And I think that's a really pertinent thing for people who might consider themselves of a different class, or, you know, white readers, or whatever it might be, to not extricate themselves from the scenario, to not be on safari. Speaking of safari, there's a brilliant book called Poverty Safari by Darren McGarvey. I don't know whether you've read it, which is also a really searing exploration of this notion of poverty and how people are treated and reduced to tropes because of their financial circumstance. So the title "Poor," talk to me about that, because, you know, sonically as a word, it's a punch. Poor, you know, it's a slash across the book in these big, you know, big capital graphics. To me, that feels like a provocation.
Yeah.
What was the thinking behind calling your collection "Poor"?
Exactly that. That's mad. I love that you said that, because exactly that's what it is. I wanted to implicate and to force some sort of reaction out of everyone. You know, I wanted it to pack a punch, and that word "poor" is one that really we're all sensitive to in various ways. You say, if you come from a wealthy background, the word "poor" does something to you. It chills us. Every single one of us, whether you're in it or whether you consider yourself as poor, financially poor or not. And also I was trying to, I guess, ask the question as well, like, what is the definition of poor? How do we, in what context do we consider poor, like poverty? Poor, are we poor in health? Are we poor in love? Are we poor in family? I keep like going back to this this conversation that Bob Marley had with an interviewer who was asking him about whether he was rich or not, and he was like, "What's riches to you?" You know, because you're talking about the bank account. I don't have that sort of riches. However, I'm rich in love. I'm rich in family. I'm rich in all these things. So I guess for me, it was just trying to open up questions about our understanding of poverty. When we look at people that society considers poor, in what ways do we feel like superior to them? Like, is it financially? Because some of us are still living a quality of life that is can't be considered as poor, because they have family around them, and they have love around them, and they have health as well. That's another, you know, space to consider this whole idea of being poor. So
it's and now that I think about it, of all the things that came up in the book as I was reading it, there was a deep well of sadness and fear around all the violence, the paranoia, you know, all of these aspects. But deprivation was not something that I felt reading the book. Although one can take for granted that often people that live in these estate buildings, you know, they've not got loads of money, they've not got loads of resources, and oftentimes that's because of, you know, governmental neglect than anything else. But when I think about the resourcefulness of growing up that way, the hustle, in fact, the abundance that comes from knowing that you've got to make this much stretch this far, right? You know, our mums were on the environmental tip long before that became the cool bougie thing for the hippie mums to do. Like our mums been putting oxtail in the margarine tub and the ice cream tub. They've been reusing the shopping bags. They've been doing this. right. So yeah, I think, okay, this is a really nice lead on to another question I wanted to ask you. Do you feel that there is, I'll say, I feel like there is a shift in how the lives of people living on estates is being depicted. I'm thinking of films like Rocks and Cuties, also things like I May Destroy You and Chewing Gum by Michaela Cole, who gave you this incredible quote on the front of the book. Yeah. Real recognize real. So yeah, I feel like all of these, incidentally, Black women have been at the forefront of a real shift in the way estate living is depicted. I feel like Michaela Cole in particular has given a sense of the color and the really sort of fluid notion of family and community, and the jokes and the vibes and all of these things that can be part of the estate experience, which are so separate from what we're used to seeing, which is, you know, the top boy thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the truth too. But that is definitely the thing that the imagined white viewer tends to seek and fetishize. So do you feel like there is a shift going on in the zeitgeist as far as how we look at that particular demographic of people and the places they live?
Absolutely. First of all, definitely, it's again and again, it's usually Black women who are leading the sort of movements in many different frontiers. So shout out that fact. Secondly, I definitely appreciate just all the new work that has really expanded or challenged the perception of working class life, or moving before, because working class such a complex state of class now to define. Underclass, I guess, in one way, or Carla uses that phrase a lot when describing people who are systematically let down, because so in that way, I've appreciated it. I saw Rocks, and it just made my heart sing so much. And I May Destroy You excited me. I remember the first episode just like feeling, do you know what? It was in one way I felt so lucky, and I felt so happy and relieved. And then I thought, why am I feeling these things that should have already been? Like, there's always a sense of like being appreciative, which I absolutely am for the creation of this story. But also, it's really come so late, hasn't it? It should have been, and it should have always been. But we're here now. Yeah. And that's something to note. So yeah, long may it continue in that way.
I think that feeling is a grief as adults, that we didn't have that in our formative years when we needed it most. But I tell you, I'm so happy for the young people coming up. I'm still young myself, I get that.
Exactly.
But to be 5 years old and to be in a world where Black beauty is being celebrated and venerated and isn't just a niche thing over here in Essence magazine or in your very particular little pockets of society, something that is everywhere, that you don't have to seek out and scrabble for. To look to Netflix and see films like Rocks on there that are specific to the Black British experience. You're not having to look at these exports from African American TV and film to see people that look like you. Like it's a time to be alive. As a young Black kid, like it's a time, and I'm happy for them. But I'm also sad for little me because she didn't have that. Yeah, man. So I feel that completely. So I want to talk to you about this piece 13, and we'd love to hear it if you're willing to read it as well.
Absolutely.
And it touches on this really fraught and kudos to you for being so subtle with depicting this strange thing of the policing of these areas and the fear that Black boys learn to have around the police, but then also this supposed familiarity and aspiration that should come from these figures that are supposed to have almost a custodian style role within these communities. This is what the police purport to be doing, right? They want to have people in these areas that are familiar to the people that live there and could be people that you could legitimately come to in trouble and whatever else. And I think we both know that is very rarely the case. So in amongst all the conversations that have flared up this year with Black Lives Matter and this really quite what used to be considered quite an extreme thing of defunding the police, now part of our mainstream conversations about how we deal with this problem of police brutality, how do you think your work sits alongside this public conversation? And what's your opinion on how we should deal with the police?
Okay, right. So where should I start? I think that there's something about your childhood as a Black body that gets warped, where you're not afforded that sort of perception of being a child. I forget the word that I would use to describe it, but I don't know what it means. You can be 13 and be referred to as a man. You can be like 7 and be referred to as an adult. And and there's something systematic about that. It's part of the fabric of subjugation, of sort of oppression, really, when you can look at children as adults and therefore they can face the consequences of any supposed crime. In that way, which is very interesting, because everything that you kind of aspire to as a young child is all hanging on the balance that you are allowed to be a child for until you are not a child anymore. So that and there's a playfulness that's taken away from you. There's to really be aware of the state of the world really can do something to your self-confidence, your self-perception, your idea of fear, and then also your relationship with anxiety, which just has lots of knock-on effects generally. And then also this idea of like the police and what role they're supposed to play in your community is one of protection, is one of safety, peace of mind. You see a police officer, your heart shouldn't race, your heart should feel at ease. But that's never the case. And that's a global conversation. I'm so happy that all the police states globally are being questioned, whether in America or over here or on the continent of Africa or in Asia, anywhere. Everyone is questioning the role of the police and how complicit they are in the oppression of working class people, but more so specifically working class Black people. in that way. So I'm glad that the conversation's happening. When we talk about what to do and this whole idea of defunding, I'm definitely for it, definitely for defunding. I think that it doesn't work because on a sort of intrinsically like systematic level, the police are never going to be able to do what they're supposed to be doing because they are upholding other pillars that are essential to the oppression of so many people. So therefore they can't work, and therefore we need to restructure our ideas around that. But then also I definitely like to disclaim that there are people who are very, very, very much more qualified to sort of figure out what needs to be done. And maybe it's maybe the conversation of defunding isn't the right one, and there's another one that we haven't thought about yet, or we haven't allowed the people who actually know what they're talking about. So the people who are part of the oppressed population, but also have new and innovative ideas to make things work. I haven't been I haven't allowed time to really go down that sort of route because I'm just a
and also it's not your job. You're a poet, innit? Like,
exactly.
Let's all stick to our remits. And I was going to say, I love that about your answer, is that there's a real humility and acceptance of the limits of your knowledge, your skill sets, your time. You've contributed what you need to contribute to the conversation. We don't expect policymakers to write poems and vice versa.
Absolutely. God, no.
Yeah. So this is it. Okay, so I would love to hear a poem. It could be 13, since we've just discussed that, or it can be another one that you'd like to read. 13. Just give the people a little snippet.
Cool. This is 13. You will be 4 minutes from home when you are cornered by an officer who will tell you of a robbery 40 minutes ago in the area. You fit the description of a man. You will laugh. 13. You will tell him you're 13. You'll be patted on the shoulder then by another Fed whose face takes you back to Gloucester Primary School. A Wednesday assembly about being little stars. This officer had a horizon in the east of his smile when he told your class that you were all supernovas, the biggest and brightest stars. You will show the warmth of your teeth, praying he remembers the heat of your supernova. He will see you powerless, plump. You will watch the two men cast lots for your organs. Don't you remember me, you will ask. You gave a talk at my primary school. Whilst fear condenses on your lips, you will remember that Wednesday after the assembly, your teacher speaking more about supernovas, how they are, in fact, dying stars on the verge of becoming black holes. Cool. That was 13.
I'm a big fan of creeping devastation, you know? The type of devastation that it's like when you've been out in the drizzle and you're like, it's just a bit of drizzle, but then you get home and you're soaked. It's like that. Like, I didn't even know it was that deep, but it's that deep. And I think that's one of your many skills as a writer, is your incredible way with restraint. And it means that when we reach these heightened moments, like there's a poem that is an absolute sucker punch, especially when you contrast it to pieces like 13 that you just read. I think it starts with like, what ends you from? Is that how it starts? Right. Do you know what community. I mean? What ends you from? Yeah, it's called Community. Oh, here we go. Yeah. It starts fucking who's chatting shit. That poem right there. I mean, I would love that as like a dramatic monologue, and it reads that way. So yeah, I think you've got an incredible toolkit of registers, and you bounce between them all. You know, you've got the subtle bittersweet moments, you've got the disarming lyricism, you've got that vernacular that is, I mean, it sounds so corny, but you know, it's very authentic and gritty. all these adjectives that we hate when white Guardian writers slap them on us, but you know, they're applicable to a certain extent. But yeah, I was going to ask you about humor and how important you feel humor and those light moments are in your work, because the person who wrote that profile on you in The Guardian spoke about what she felt to be an overall dark feeling in the collection. And I understand her point in that there is many moments of darkness, but then you countered that with what you feel to be lots of joy in the collection. So talk to me about humor and the use of that in your collection.
Humor has been such an important tool, such a vital tool in surviving harsh circumstances. I think generally in our community we use that it's weird, like globally, like we see in all the various cultures of Blackness, there's this like underlining thing where we use humor as a way of coping, as a way of processing trauma and sadness and grief. Because I think when you get to a point where grief comes and then comes again and then comes again and then comes again, it's almost like, what can we do? Like, we know this is a thing now, like let's focus on the good times then, you know. When you're from the UK, it rains a lot, and like there's only a certain level of time that you're just not going to go out because it's raining. After a while, you're just going to find a way to go to that nightclub or to go to that thing or go see your mates or do things, and you just like put on, you know, the right gear for it. So yes, humor is such a brave thing to like embrace in dark times. And speaking of the darkness as well, I think with this collection, I said it's almost like going to a birthday party and then coming back and saying, oh, there was a fire there because some candles were lit. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what do you hold on to? Like, what are you looking for?
If there's already a predisposition in you to find darkness because you've been given this collection called Poor and you've heard that it's about Black boys in Peckham, then you've already been primed to focus on the darkness. Absolutely. The darkness is a structural aesthetic. Do you know what I mean? We can't do nothing about that. We don't invite that into the space. That space exists. That's I think more than anything, violence. With this collection, one of the most important things I wanted to subvert was this whole idea of violence. What violence is happening to us. Do you know what I mean? Like, hold on one second. There's some delightful kids having fun on Caleb's end.
In here. So
we love it.
Absolutely. So the violence that is enacted, like the violence that you see in this space is because there is violence happening to this space. There's structural violence, and that doesn't look the same as people hurting each other. It looks a little bit different. It looks like Grenfell. Do you know what I mean? It's the structural violence that makes this place dark, not the actions of individuals who have to find a way to like navigate through this like difficult space.
And you talk a lot about how architecture exacerbates that, and I want to ask you about that in a moment, but there's a couple questions here. Okay, I'm going to start with the easy one, which is, can poetry change the world? Go on, Caleb. Boom.
I think you can chime in on that question as well. Can poetry change the world?
Who was it? Oh, you know what? I hate it when not only can I not remember the quote really, but I can't remember who said it. So I've set myself up to fail. But there was a poet who said poetry changes nothing. I can't remember who it was. Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think also writers tend to have an obvious bias of thinking it can. We want to overstate the power of writing because we want to justify our life choices. Yeah, exactly. You know what? I think more than anything, as an exercise that one can engage in, so less about the product of the writing and how it moves through the world and how people receive it, but the act of writing poetry as a therapeutic tool, as a way of organizing one's thoughts, as a way of speaking back to oneself and hearing your own thoughts back at you in a way that you may not have imagined. That as a process, I think, is incredibly powerful. And you and I know that, we facilitate workshops and, we've been in the slam scene, and we understand the power of that for people on an individual level. Whether that changes the world, I mean, I don't know how you begin to quantify that, but I think more so than writing a book that changes the world, I think the act of writing, and as much people as possible being empowered to do that and have the confidence to do that, that to me feels like a very important thing.
Yeah, I think poetry changes small worlds. And,
that's much more of a bar than what I said.
No, I think it's basically reiterating what you're saying, really.
Yeah, each person is a small world.
Yeah. And
their world can be changed by the notion that, wow, if I pick up this pen and I just put what's going on in here down here, then this storm inside me quietens it for a little bit,
Exactly.
That's powerful. Yeah. All right, next question. You've both been official city poets. What were the main things you learned about your cities through the work you did? So what did you learn about London through being the poet laureate?
First of all, I learned that London is a very, very, very big space. And there are parts of London that we don't even like think about, which made me really sad. That made me really feel very ignorant, because I feel very ignorant when thinking about the UK as a whole. There are like 5 cities that I can say, right? I know Bristol, I know Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and like Brighton, maybe, which is so embarrassing to say. But I thought London, I know every corner of London, and realizing that there are communities in London that I didn't know anything about was something that really made me wake up to know better and do better and expand my understanding of the space that I live in, the city that I live in. But more than anything, it really hammered home this sense of community that exists in London, and something that I kind of felt died, but actually very much still exists. I think because of Peckham undergoing gentrification and me losing touch of so many people in my community, I thought, it's happening all over London. It's happened to East London. It's happened here.
Right.
There's no, like, the idea of community in London is dead. And then I was proven wrong. Happily proven wrong. How about you?
Very similar. So many parts of Bristol that felt like different countries, never mind different cities, like the shift in demographics. People often talk about Bristol. Well, it's statistically proven, actually, that Bristol is the most segregated city in the UK. So the demographic shift, a bus ride away from where I am now, you're like, oh, here's where all the brown people are. Like, it's really, it's such a shift. And thinking about all these areas where there's a real lack of arts and culture, the idea that people have to trek it into the centre to be able to look at a painting or, watch the film they want to see, or a theatre show, or whatever else. People talk a lot about the financial barriers, and those are, of course, there too. But I think when we make it so that culture is only ever in the centre of the city, and don't empower people to create things within their own spaces, that for me feels like a real oversight. It's really interesting when you're a poet that's supposed to represent an entire city. It's like, what does that even mean? What does that look like? You know, you can have 5 people in a room, and even just trying to come to a consensus as to like what brings those 5 people together is like, never mind a city of 500,000 people. So it's a bit of a mad role. You know, you can kind of get yourself in a bit of a spin as to what it means to represent all these people. But I really enjoyed wrestling with that question for 2 years and not finding an answer. But I think the whole point is there isn't one. But it was still a good experience to try and work out what on earth that means and how I could take the civic aspect of the role seriously. I didn't want to just write poems about my experience of the city for 2 years, you know, not on the taxpayer's dime. Do you know what I mean? So it was a very, very difficult experience in terms of like the moral, not to overstate it all, but to feel this sense of like, I feel a moral responsibility to try and go to every corner of this city and really understand what people talk about when they talk about Bristol, because you know, everybody's talking about a different thing. Like you say, you felt like London as a whole had gone a particular way, and then you discovered different. But anyway, we've not got much time left, so I don't want to get too lost down that rabbit hole. Cool. Let's see. One more question. When you think about potentially having children in the future, what life do you hope for them? Oh, that's a deep question.
The life that I hope for them is one of possibility, you know, unencumbered possibility. They can do and be whoever they want, and they're more preoccupied with sense of fulfillment and satisfaction through genuine happiness and genuine joy and respect for others, and value for community, and yeah, that's it. How about you?
I mean, I don't even know if I'm trying to have kids like that, you know. I like having my tits above my knees. I like having a lie-in. Climate change be a nibbling away at the earth. So there's selfish reasons, but there's also ethical reasons as to why it doesn't necessarily feel like the best decision ever. But you can never say never in this life. What I would hope for any child, and for me, I feel like I carry auntie energy. Like I will always approach young children like I am their auntie. Like you know, you know what I mean? I think to be an auntie, because what people need to understand about the role of auntie is that has a real fluid usage in our community, right? Like any woman of a certain age who has that maternal energy is an auntie, right? Like I was raised by various aunties throughout my life. And they are of no less significance to me than my biological mother. But yeah, I have the auntie feeling of like, I want every kid to just like live in their light, you know? I want every kid to be laughing and vibing all the time. Like you say, to just have that for as long as they possibly can, which is hard in this life. It's hard when they've got Insta and TikTok, and it's hard when some of these kids aren't even having, you know, 3 square meals a day. It's hard. It's hard. And us Black kids, not only are we considered older by these eyes of, you know, authority figures or the police or whatever else, but within our own families, we are forced to grow up quick. You know, it's that migrant thing. They're like, you got to get up at 7, you got to do the chores. Like, you know, you got to go do this, you got to do that. Like, I don't care what your white friend Poppy is doing. Like, all that type of stuff, right? So I feel like I grew up quick, and I'm grateful for that. But also, my kids in my little sphere of auntiedom, my kids are going to live and they're going to enjoy. That's all. Let me see if there's any more questions. Okay, there's one question here from Sean. Who are the poets or artists in general that have influenced you the most?
Right. I try to give a different answer every time. Who has influenced me that I haven't said before? Do you know what? Someone who has really, really impacted my work is a writer called Kai Miller.
Yes, the Kai Miller.
Yes, Kai Miller wrote this collection called The Light Song of Light, and that changed my perception of what was possible. Like, it's about light. He's writing about light, but he's writing about so many different things. And to be able to give yourself such a strict mandate and be able to talk about everything in the world really inspired me, excited me, and just like and just motivated me to be able to write something that was as daring as that.
He's also got a collection called A Cartographer Maps His Way to Zion that is one of my favorites. Absolutely stunning.
And a new collection called In Nearby Bushes.
Yes, which I have yet to read, but yeah. Someone said Pac or Biggie in the chat, and I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I want to ask one more question before we wrap up. So the Guardian profile.
Oh, Biggie.
I mean, let's not. In the Guardian profile that was written about you, the journalist said, and I'm just going to quote this: "It's hard to pay the rent as a poet, so he has made film poems to order for Heathrow Airport and, comically given his views on gentrification, for the upmarket handbag manufacturer Mulberry."
I love that.
So yeah, I mean, she came for your neck a little bit on that one.
Yeah.
She said, "Oh,
yeah, we
interesting." And I would just like to give you an opportunity to clap back. I mean, no, I'm joking.
No.
I mean, this is a conversation that I'm really interested in. Like, we don't like to talk about it because we're very uncomfortable about money. But you know, what is the relationship for you between art and income? How do you decide what things to say yes to and what to say no to? Because you've worked with these high end fashion brands, Mulberry, Louis Vuitton. Was there any type of ethical quandary for you in doing that? Or for you, is it just like, that's cool with me, I like the brief, I'm happy to work for, you know, these types of companies? Like, what's your take on all of that?
I think when it's hard, isn't it? Because we're all implicated in everything. Like, I can't be here saying, you know, ethically, this is a bit mad, but then I've got an iPhone. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And that is like, there's a huge conversation in Congo right now about the exploitation of people, of Congolese people. But I've got an iPhone and I'm going to sit here with my laptop and this and all these things and have this like self-righteous conversation about the diluting my art. What? Shut up. I think it's about individual choice, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Guys, I need to pay the rent. Sometimes I have to do stuff that means that, you know, it's not all the way my art, but I'm contributing to something commercially. It is what it is. We just have to forgive me and keep it moving, really. Because I can't come and die, you know, like. I was glad that I was glad that Claire mentioned that as well, because it's like, it's such a difficult thing. In one way, I want to be able to have the resources to make work that is purely mine and is purely led by me and is for my community. But the reality is that there isn't enough funding bodies out there that give you that. Do you know what I mean? So you have to look elsewhere sometimes. And funnily enough, every personal work that I have done, most of my earnings elsewhere go straight into that. Do you know what I mean? Right. The Mulberry, the money for the Mulberry, everything that I made off that went straight into making my film Survivor's Guilt. So that would not have been possible if, you know.
Yeah. Robin Hood methodology, man.
Yeah.
I'm about it. I have to wrap it up there, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Even though there's so much more I want to
There was so
many questions I have. But thank you so much for joining us, guys. Please do buy a copy of Poor. You can click this turquoise button just here to get yourself one. Thank you so much to Caleb for answering all those probing questions. Thank you, Festival of Ideas, for hosting. Can I just ask, this is an admin question, sorry, but the people that do the admin, don't just cut it. Can me and Caleb just stay on the thing for a little bit before it gets cut off?
Yes.
Because it's so abrupt, Caleb. It just cuts off and it's like, bye. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, have a good rest of your Saturdays. Yeah, much love. Oh, they're saying, we're really sorry, Vanessa, we can't. That's so deep. That's so deep. I'll holler at you on some other means of communication.
Yeah, I'll DM you now anyway.
Yeah. All right, boom. Okay, bye everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.